Hello, and welcome to another episode of We Are What We Read. I'm your host, Kristopher Zgorski, the founder and sole reviewer at the award-winning book blog BOLO Books. And you all know my co-host, Shawn Reilly Simmons, as an award-winning author, an award-winning editor, an award-winning publisher, a podcast host, a dear friend, and a beloved member of our crime fiction community. Thanks for joining me again, Shawn.
I'm honored to be here, and you're my award-winning friend, so that's good.
Thanks so much. During the earlier episodes of We Are What We Read, I have explained that this initiative was inspired by my being selected by the Mouse Domestic Convention to receive the Amelia Award next year. I've also explained that it's meant as a pushback against the book banning that we're seeing happening across the nation that we're all distressed about. And for this episode, I just want to take a moment to point out and explain that when I'm selecting guests for the show, I'm really putting diversity first. And this means diversity in all its forms. This means you're going to see people of color, you're going to see members of the LGBTQ plus community, you're going to see authors, fans, publishing professionals. You're going to see representation from all subgenres encompassed by the crime fiction label. There will be participants who are published by the big publishing houses as well as by smaller publishers. You will see veterans of the industry as well as folks who are just starting their career. In short, We Are What We Read is meant to reflect the depth and breadth of our community, not because it's a trendy thing to do, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only thing to do. And with that, we're going to get ourselves started and not waste another minute. First up, we have John Copenhaver. John Copenhaver is the award-winning author of two historical mysteries, Dodging and Burning in 2018 and The Savage Kind in 2021. He co-hosts on the House of Mystery radio show. He teaches creative writing and literature at VCU and in a low-res MFS program at the University of Nebraska. His forthcoming third novel, Hall of Mirrors, is the sequel to The Savage Kind and one of my most anticipated books coming up. So welcome, John.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on, Shawn and Chris. I think this is such a cool thing that you're doing. And so I'm going to jump in at sharing my pick, which was or is Giovanni's Room, which is a classic book by James Baldwin. And I know, just get this out of the way, it's not a crime novel per se. But it is a novel that's dear to me. I also teach it in a queer literature class at VCU, and it's a book that's also influencing my writing a lot. And I think really important to the theme of your show here. It's, and Baldwin himself is banned all over the place. So what is it about? It is Baldwin's second book. It's about a closeted gay man who, in the 1950s, who moves to Paris to sort of run away from his problems. He ends up falling in love with a man named Giovanni. And the book begins at the ending, which is that Giovanni is on death row. He's going to be executed for murdering someone. I'm not giving anything away by saying that, because it's really a book more about why did Giovanni do it, and how is David's sort of relationship with this man brought about perhaps this tragic circumstance. I admire the book so greatly. One, because structurally it's very innovative. You can see how small it is and all my fun little, you can tell I'm a teacher, fun little flags, but it's short because it's all done in flashback. We begin at the end and then it all sort of happens and is woven together through flashback, which makes it very agile storytelling instead of being strictly chronological. You have to be a master craftsman to do that, but Baldwin is. And the other thing that's super important to me about the book is that it's a lot about how sort of white American masculinity, particularly the 1950s variety, which frankly I would argue we're still struggling with today, really keeps and thwarts a gay man from finding himself in coming in, it's really in touch with that part of himself. And so you know, it really does have a tragic arc, but I think in many ways it's a story that we're still struggling with today. It feels just very, you know, very, very contemporary in a lot of ways. I certainly, you know, highly recommend it. Highly recommend anything Baldwin wrote. And also, I just want to say Baldwin is not only a great writer, but he's like one of the best like human beings the 21st century created. So if you're interested in the man himself, his biography is great. So there's many of them actually, but you know, I would definitely check out this book and celebrate Baldwin in many of his writings. So yes.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that book. I had not read that one. I've read Baldwin, you know, I was an English major, so read him in college, but I'm going to get that one right away. That sounds fascinating. And it would be so great if we weren't still working on all the things we're still working on since then, but hopefully we're making some progress. But thank you for highlighting that. And that's just wonderful. Thank you so much for being here too.
My pleasure.
Our next guest, I'm very excited to introduce, is Robyn Gigl. It's spelled Gigl. I just had the hardest pronunciation, but thank God she gave us a key to how to say it. So that's good. Thank you, Robyn. Robyn is an author, attorney, and an advocate on LGBTQ+ issues. Robyn's first novel, By Way of Sorrow, was called Quietly Groundbreaking by the New York Times and named one of the best crime novels of 2021 by Crime Reads. Her second novel, Survivor's Guilt, received a starred review from Publishers Weekly, was named as one of the best crime novels of 2022 by the New York Times, and won the Joseph Hansen Award for LGBTQ+ crime writing. Robyn's third novel, Remain Silent, was published on May 23rd, 2023. So that just happened. The main character in each of her books is a New Jersey criminal defense attorney, Erin McCabe. Erin is brave, smart, funny, and transgender. Robyn lives in New Jersey, where she continues to practice law by day and work on her fourth Erin McCabe novel by night. Fortunately, she has a very boring social life. Well, I can't imagine that, but here we are. So it's so great to have you here, Robyn. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Shawn, and Kristopher too. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor. And Kristopher, congratulations on the Amelia. That's wonderful. So in my case, there's so many books to pick from, and you know, two that stand out in my mind. The first one was Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, because I read it when I was a teenager, and it was so different from anything else that I had read. The second, and the one that I picked, is Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow. Certainly a seminal work, and the book that got me hooked on legal thrillers. Presumed Innocent was published 36 years ago in the summer of 1987. When it came out, it spent over 40 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. I will say to anybody who hasn't read it and decides to read it now, I read it when it was published in 1987, and I've reread it several times, including during the pandemic. And it mostly stands the test of time, but it was written in the mid-1980s. So there's some things that are a little dated, especially in terms of language and the treatment of certain communities. But in fairness, having read it in 1987 when it came out, it accurately represents how people talked and acted in the 1980s. Presumed Innocent begins with the discovery of the dead body of Carolyn Pohemus, a very attractive assistant prosecutor in fictional Kendall County, think Chicago, who's been killed by a single blow to the skull with an unknown object while she was tied up. So there's two theories. It's unclear whether she was tied up and sexually assaulted by an intruder, or if she was involved in some type of consensual act that went wrong. The novel is told from the first-person point of view of Rosette, Rusty Savage, who is also a Kendall County assistant prosecutor and co-worker of Carolyn. Rusty's boss, District Attorney Raymond Horgan, is in a brutal re-election campaign with an old protege by the name of Nico Della Guarda. Horgan assigns Rusty to investigate Carolyn's murder with the hope that he'll quickly solve the case and thereby boost Horgan's chances for re-election. It's also clear to Rusty that his own career as an assistant prosecutor is dependent on Horgan's victory, because if Delagarda wins, Rusty's out of a job. Further complicating things is the fact that Rusty had a brief affair with Carolyn that ended months before her murder, which no one is aware of except Rusty's wife. Despite his obvious conflict of interest, Rusty takes charge of the investigation and tries to divert it away from the DA's office and, of course, him. Rusty replaces the original assigned investigator with a friend of his, and despite that, the evidence begins to mount against Rusty, and it begins to look like he's the prime suspect in the case. Horgan loses the election, and within days of Delagarda becoming the district attorney, he charges Rusty with Carolyn's murder. Rusty hires Alejandro Sandy Stern, a criminal defense attorney who Rusty has been up against several times in his cases as a prosecutor. I will say as an aside, Sandy is a wonderful character who shows up in several of Theroux's later novels, including his most recent one, Suspect, although he's just a peripheral character in that one. I won't go into the details of Rusty's defense, too many spoilers, but there's misplaced evidence, issues involving the medical examiner's conclusions, political corruptions, and lots of courtroom drama. What's interesting is that when the case against Rusty ends, we still don't know who killed Carolyn. And there's still another 60 pages to go in the book. Again, no spoilers, but the way Theroux handled the reveal of the murderer is a classic. And for those of us who were reading it in 1987, before the movie and everybody knew the ending, it was a wow moment. I think what made the novel so unique at the time was that even though we're in Rusty's head, his point of view, and on some level, we're rooting for him, there are so many things that he does throughout the novel that point to him as guilty. So we're torn. Rusty seems like a decent guy, but is he really a murderer? The novel was made into a 1990 movie directed by Alan J. Pakula and starring Harrison Ford as Rusty. And while those are two of my favorite people in movies, I still think the novel is far superior.
Thanks so much, Robyn. I have to tell you that I also read it in 1987, and I can still remember that twist and saying, wow, that was something. So if you haven't read it and you don't know the twist, keep yourself spoiler-free and read it. Thanks so much for bringing that to us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sherry Harris. Sherry Harris is the Agatha Award-nominated author of the Sarah Winston Garage Sale Mystery Series and the Chloe Jackson Seaglass Saloon Mysteries. Sherry is a past president of Sisters in Crime and a member of Mystery Writers of America. Sherry loves books, beaches, bars, and bargain hunting, not necessarily in that order. Welcome, Sherry.
Oh, congratulations, Kristopher, and thanks to both of you for having me. So I chose Time's Undoing by Cheryl A. Head. I met Cheryl when I moderated a panel she was on, and that introduced me to her wonderful Charlie Mack series. So when I'd heard she'd written a standalone based on her family's history, I immediately put Time's Undoing on my reading list. The cover is stunning and the story is too. I do want to read just a couple of quick reviews. Few books feel more timely or needed than this one. That's from The Atlantic. And then the parallel narratives work with poignancy and righteous rage. So many decades gone, so few inroads made into the racism at the foundation of United States history. And that one's from NPR. I struggled to figure out what to say about this book because there's so much to say. On one hand, it's a fast-paced mystery that has you on the edge of your seat from the very beginning. It builds suspense, and it gives you that uneasy feeling that I love to have when I'm reading a book. You know, that, oh, be careful, delicious sense of dread and anticipation. You know from the beginning that the past story has ends with a murder, but the why of that murder and the circumstances surrounding it are so compelling. And the present day storyline is of a reporter, a young woman searching for answers about her family's past. It's just as compelling as you wonder what's going to happen to her as she searches for the truth, and people want to make sure the truth is never discovered. It's filled with wonderfully written, fully developed characters, and Head brings Birmingham, Alabama to life. But it's also a book that made me think. It made me think about my place in the world, my privilege. And this is a book that will stay with you for a long time after reading it. And it's one that I'll be reading again. I can't recommend it enough.
I heartily agree with that endorsement and recommendation. Everything you said is absolutely correct about, I mean, it's just one of my favorite books, recent books too, that I've read. And Cheryl is just one of the best people I've met recently too. So thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that book to us, because everyone should read it. It's so good.
I agree. I agree.
Thanks. It's good to see you too, by the way, Sherry.
You too, Shawn.
You owe me a glass of wine, by the way. I'm not forgetting.
Okay.
I'll see you soon. Our next guest, we are so thrilled to invite Grace Koshida to the show. Hi, Grace. Grace has been an avid reader and collector of crime fiction for over 45 years. Ever since attending her first BatcherCon in 1992, she got hooked on going to events and connecting with the crime fiction community. She lives in Ottawa, Ontario. Now I have to remind myself which one was 1992. You're gonna have to tell us.
It's
But welcome to the show.
yeah. Thanks, Shawn. It was the first Toronto one. Yeah, Toronto's my hometown. So I started in 1992, but I also did go to 2004 and 2017. So the book that I decided to talk about tonight is Going to Beautiful by Anthony Bedulka. It was published in 2022. This is Anthony's 12th book, and it's a standalone. Now, I've been reading Anthony's books since the mid-2000s, mainly his Russell Quant series, which features a gay PI based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. But I wanted to highlight this book tonight because it's such a unique book. The main character, Jake Hardy, is a celebrity chef, and he's at the top of his game with several restaurants in Toronto. He has a wonderful personal life with his loving husband, Eddie, and his adult son and a cute dog. But then Eddie dies in a tragic accident and Jake's life is shattered. The bulk of the story takes place a year later, and Jake is still grappling with how to move forward. One day he finds a handwritten note with 3 places listed. And one of the places is beautiful. And that's a total puzzle. He has no idea what beautiful means. He knows that Eddie grew up in Saskatchewan, but nothing else. So on the spur of the moment, he and his best friend Baz decide to fly from Toronto to beautiful Saskatchewan to find out more about Eddie's past. Now, I know a lot of you think that all winters in Canada are cold, but there's a difference between January in Toronto and January in rural Saskatchewan. And I will say that Jake and Baz were totally ill-prepared for landing in this tiny, decrepit town in the middle of a snowstorm. Their rental car breaks down. They have to seek refuge in a convent that's run by the sole surviving nun in her 80s. And over the next few days, they slowly meet the various eclectic members of people who live in Beautiful. And at first, nobody has heard of Eddie or Eddie's family. But gradually, as they go throughout different community events and meeting different people, they get a trail. And it leads towards Eddie's parents who live on a farm outside of Beautiful. And they arrange to have a meeting. But that sets in motion a series of events that reveal some long-held dark secrets, and frankly, a few murders that have to be solved before the community itself could heal, and that Jake and Baz could heal as well. So I love this book for so many reasons. I love the diverse characters. There's a lot of ethnicities, elderly characters, 2 main LGBTQ characters. I love the small town community feel of the book, the warmth and how everybody worked together. And also the setting. There frankly are not that lot of books set in rural Saskatchewan for Canadian crime fiction. But I'm not the only one that loved this book. On May 25th, the Crime Writers of Canada awarded Going to Beautiful the top prize of Best Crime Novel of the Year. And I'm just going to read what the judges had to say about this book. Each with their own unique voice, the eclectic characters in Going to Beautiful jump off the page and become part of your daily thoughts. Dodging suspicious innuendos and suffering from unprocessed grief, Jake Hardy ventures out in search of his husband's unknown heritage. Along for the emotional roller coaster ride is his glamorous 78-year-old transgender neighbor, Baz. The result of their adventurous quest leads them to a town that is wonderfully simple and complex at once, and will have you pulling up Google Maps for your next road trip. A beautifully crafted mystery, the plot provides humor, love, and a big twist at the end you won't see coming. Highly recommended. The unanimous pick for first place as best crime novel. So it was, this was frankly one of my favorite reads last year, and I'm just thrilled to be able to tell more people about this book. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Grace. And this highlights another form of diversity. We have regional diversity. I'd love to see people bring in Canadian crime fiction to the forefront. So thank you for that. I'm a huge fan of Anthony's as well. I actually highly recommend the first Russell Quant book, Amuse Bouche. It's one of my favorite crime mysteries of all time. So definitely. So thanks so much for bringing that to us.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have James Latoile. James Latoile uses his 29 years behind bars as an associate warden in a maximum security prison, a hostage negotiator, and a director of California state parole system to influence his award-winning novels, short stories, and screenplays. His most recent novel is the Lefty and Anthony nominated Dead Drop, Look for Devil Within, and Face of Greed, coming in 2023. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Kristopher. And again, congratulations on your Amelia Award. It's amazing. You do so much for the community, and it's great to see the recognition come back. Thanks, Shawn and Kristopher, for inviting me today. When I was asked to come up with a book for today's session, it was really harder than I thought. There's so many good books coming out right now from people like Megan Abbott, T. Jefferson Parker, Allison Galen, LynDee Walker, Shawn Cosby. I mean, the list goes on. But I'm a sucker for debut novels. I like finding a new voice, one that I have no preconceptions about, and kind of let them take me on a ride. And you couple that with a unique, complex character, and I'm all in. And that's why I'm recommending Scorched Grace by Margot Duwahi. Margot's debut novel, and we meet one of my favorite characters ever in Sister Holiday. Sister Holiday is a chain-smoking, gold-toothed, tattooed queer nun in a convent in New Orleans, and she's unapologetic about any of it. She's a great character, and that's a lot to unpack. Sister Holiday is a recovering punk musician. She's teaching music in a convent school when she turns amateur sleuth. The convent's been attacked by a serial arsonist, and she's not satisfied with the local authorities and their response to it. So she takes it upon herself to go and track the parties down. There's a great supporting cast in the book, and she gives us a really look into the complex life that led Sister Holiday to the convent. And there's some introspection that happens in her journey there. The way the story is structured, it's almost like a closed circle story. You meet the characters early on and the plot kind of unfolds. Margot's not shy about diving into the trauma, betrayal, and redemption that Scorched Grace talks about. And the story will keep you guessing. There's a great twist. The narrative of the book is a little lyrical. Margot's a poet, and I think that shows in the way that the book comes out. She draws the reader into this world, and the way that the narrative is structured, it almost feels a little bit like Megan Abbott. It's that silky smooth, just kind of, it just lures you right in. The book is the first in a new imprint from Zando Books. It's actually Gillian Flynn's imprint. And this was the very first book that Gillian selected to be the flagship for her imprint. Gillian said that Sister Holiday and Camille Preaker from Sharp Objects should go on a road trip together. And that would be something that I would want to see. Margot did tell me there are 2 more Sister Holiday books in the pipeline, so I'm excited about that. It came out in February, and it's really not talked about enough. Scorched Grace, that is. It's been a New York Times book review choice. It's been a best book by Marie Claire, the American Booksellers Indie Pick List, IndieBound, Amazon Choice. Crime Reads picked it as a debut of the month, and it's recently been optioned for screenplay. So I'm excited to see that. I really want to see what the casting choices are in that one. I got my local indie bookstore to carry it, and I hope you get a chance to check it out too. Scorched Grace by Margot Dewey. Thank you.
Oh, awesome recommendation. I just got my own copy. I just literally like yesterday. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
excited that I'm going to dive into that really soon. So thanks for endorsing my decision to buy that book. So thank you.
You're quite
Thanks
welcome.
for being here. It's always great to see
You
you.
bet.
Thanks for being here.
It's good to see you, Shawn.
Okay, take care. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
I get to introduce our next guest, and it is we are honored to invite Delia Pitts to the show. Hi, Delia. I'm just like everyone else, I'm doing your introduction. Born and raised in Chicago, Delia Pitts is the author of 6 contemporary noir mysteries set in Harlem. Her new book, Trouble in Queenstown, introduces New Jersey private investigator Vandy Myrick. It will be published by Minotaur Books in the summer of 2024. So welcome to the show, and take it away, Delia.
Thank you. So delighted and honored to be here. Thank you, Shawn, and congratulations, Kristopher, on the Amelia Award. It's well-deserved recognition for you and all your work. I was torn, as many were, about what book to pick, but I went for one that I have not read in a long time and was thrilled and fun and delighted to be able to read again. I chose for my selection this time, if I can see it, Charlotte Carter's Coq au Vin. Coq au Vin. This is the middle of a 3-part amateur sleuth series. Charlotte Carter published these 3 books at the turn of this century. The first book is called Rhode Island Red, and that came out in '98. Her second book, Coq au Vin, this one came out in 1999, and the follow-up, Drumsticks, there's a theme here, came out in 2000. She's written a number of other books, not in this series, and she still lives and works in New York City. But I wanted to bring this to our attention today because I think it's a forgotten book. It's a wonderful example of detective fiction, but it's not well known, I believe. And so I thought it was important to bring it forward and talk a little bit about this. I wanted to start by quoting from what the Detroit Free Press said at the time of its publication. Coq au Vin was described as absorbing, a witty, erotic, and moving love song to Paris and its glamorous Black past. And I think some of the things that stood out for me most were first of all, the character and voice of the central figure, Nanette Hayes. Nanette is a younger woman in her late 20s. She's sort of at loose ends. She is very well educated at elite colleges and schools. She's fluent in French. She's a talented musician with professional level skills. Yet when we meet her, she works as a busker on the streets of New York because she prefers it. She chooses to play her saxophone with her hat or box out in front of her and earn a few coins from passersby. She has part-time employment, but much to the stress of her exceedingly middle-class mother and father, she is not interested in the kind of conventional career for which she was raised. she's still very much pursuing her bohemian dream. One of her models for that bohemian dream is her long absent aunt, Vivian, who absconded many, many years ago to Paris. And as it turns out, the inciting incident in this book is when Nanette's mother asks her to go and find the missing Vivian, to go to Paris, yay, to go once again return to many of the scenes and sites that Nanette had visited perhaps 5 to 10 years ago, and to seek out what has become of her aunt. This trip, of course, delights Nanette, and what we really do get is a marvelous picture of Paris. We learn through wonderfully sensual, descriptive passages and appreciation of the city itself, of its nightlife, of the restaurants, the smells, the food are all described in marvelous detail. The tone is, I think it's important to think about, is quite witty. It's quite sharp. Her voice is acerbic, but we quickly find ourselves, in effect, recapitulating a big theme of the book, which is the Black American expatriate experience in Paris. Nanette meets a young man, a very handsome jazz violinist, who's an American expatriate, African-American living in Paris. They quickly fall into lust, and he joins her in her search for the missing Aunt Vivian. Through Andre, the violinist, we learn a lot about the rich history of Black American expatriates in Paris. And no, John and I did not collaborate, but it is true that Baldwin plays an important minor role in the sense of being an inspiration, as does Josephine Baker, Bricktop, and many, many others. It's really a tour de force of history, as well as being an engaging mystery story. Nanette gets caught up in gangland situations. There is some very brief but vivid violence. This is not a cozy. It could sound that way. You might think it is, but it's not, and it's important to be aware of that as you dive into it. I think it's a delightful account. It's easy to read. Nanette is a character that you root for, although she is self-absorbed, although she is sort of in her head as much as she is in the sensual surroundings that we find her. I find it a delightful book and recommend it highly.
Thank you so much, Delia. This is exactly what this program is about. Like, I want books that people think are forgotten. This was a book I was not familiar with. Fortunately, I'm the host of the show, so I get a preview of what everybody's picking. So I've already ordered my copy. This sounds fascinating. Who doesn't want to spend time in Paris? So thanks so much for bringing that to us, Delia.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jay Roberts. Jay Roberts is an avid mystery fan who has turned the love of the genre into reviewing books for Mystery Scene magazine and soon for the Strand magazine as well. He loves to be a big cheerleader for the many authors whose work he enjoys. When he isn't curled up with a good book, Jay also writes album and concert reviews for KNAC.com and the LimelightMagazine.com. In his pre-Book Life days, Jay was also spent 25 years as a youth league basketball coach. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks, everyone. Chris, Shawn, thank you for having me, being part of the initiative. And Chris, again, like everyone else, congratulations on the Amelia Award. When I was asked to take part, I was kind of easy for me to pick the book that I was going to spotlight. The criteria said that we could pick one that was influential, either to the genre or to us, overlooked, or just in need of some kind of promotion for any other kind of reason. I decided to go with the book that is probably the most influential books in terms of stoking my lifelong love of mysteries, and that's The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. it was originally serialized in the Strand magazine between 1901 and 1902, and it's been republished countless times since. It's not overlooked. It's not really in need of any kind of extra promotional push. But as a kid, I was encouraged by my parents, George and Patricia, to read a lot. And I always gravitated towards mysteries. Now, there's 4 pillars of mysteries that started it all with me. There was Encyclopedia Brown, there was The Three Investigators, and there was those fantastic blue hardcover Hardy Boy novels. But then my parents gave me an illustrated digest-sized copy of The Hound of the Baskervilles, and it was all over. I read the book, I can't even tell you how many times, but at one point I opened the book and the whole darn thing fell apart. So I read that one a lot. Now, I think for the most part, people know the basic plot of the most famous Sherlock Holmes story of all time. Basically, Holmes and Watson get mixed up in the murder of the murder of Sir Charles Baskerville, and they end up having to try to protect the last remaining member of the Baskerville line, Sir Henry, from the curse of this supernatural hound that's led to many deaths, early deaths in the Baskerville family. There's many twists and turns, plots and betrayals that end up threatening not only Sir Henry, but also Holmes and Watson. I'm sure almost everybody has probably read this book if they're a mystery fan, so I don't want to give too much away in case someone hasn't. But even as a kid, I was completely enthralled with this book. The story itself, the setting, because I know a lot of people like the sunshine weather and everything. I like the gloom and doomy kind of weather, so that helped. And this may be revealing a little too much about what I was like as a kid, but the notion of a spectral hound on a killing rampage, aces. I run a book club in town, a mystery book club at the town library with a friend of mine, and we try to choose one classic mystery a year. And so this year we picked the Sherlock Holmes book, and we read it. And then after we had our meeting, we talked about it. We watched the Basil Rathbone version of the movie, and one of the women that was in the group, she came up to me afterwards and she told me, she said, "I've never read Sherlock Holmes before." It was like Red Fox, I'm coming. But she expressed the desire that she wanted to read more of it. So after I recovered from the first part of the statement, the shock, I realized that I had passed on the fandom to at least one person, and suddenly I was really happy about it. I've loved not only the actual official canon from Sherlock Holmes, but any number of books that other people have written that feature Sherlock Holmes. They build out the universe, like Leonard Goldberg's The Daughter of Sherlock Holmes, or Laurie R. King's Mary Russell series, or even books that just imbue a totally original character with the same kind of observational powers that Sherlock Holmes has, like Vicky Delaney's Sherlock Holmes Mystery Bookshop series. The reason I consider this such an influential work for me personally is because it was the first book that I had read that built up, even though it was still geared towards the version that I had was geared a little bit towards the kids. It built up the love of a more adult level of mysteries for me at such a young age. Everything that I've experienced on this, book life path that I'm on, with writing reviews for the magazines and still pretending I'm actually going to write a book someday, can be traced pretty much back to that early exposure for London's most notable consulting detective. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for reminding me that I really need to go back and read that again, because it's been a really long time, but it's one of those touchstone sort of, seminal works. It's just very important. If you're a mystery person, thank you for reminding me that it's time to go back and read that again. So thank you so much for being here. Also, we forgot to let everyone know when we're done recording, the wrap party is at Jay's house because he's got the bar already set up for us. We'll be over right afterwards. Anyway, that was the most fun part about working on movies, the wrap parties. So thanks, Jay. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the great recommendation. We appreciate it. Our last but not least guest is LynDee Walker, my friend LynDee. She's here and she writes about strong women who can't seem to stay out of trouble. Her books have appeared on shortlists for major crime fiction awards and once on a major national bestsellers list, smack in between her childhood heroes. You'll have to tell us who they are. I can't remember. A former journalist, she has covered everything from ribbon cuttings in high school football to capital murder and high-level police corruption. And these days writes fiction from her home in Virginia when she's not juggling laundry and children's sports schedules, just like me. Have a great time. Thank you for being here. Let's go.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I adore you both, and I am very honored to be here. Chris, another congratulations on your Amelia selection. That is incredibly deserved, and I'm thrilled for you. The bestsellers list, it was King and Grisham. Those were the two. So, not shabby company. When I was picking a book for this, I was so excited when I got the email asking me to be on. I limited myself to the past 5 years of reading so that I would have some chance of actually picking one single book. And that actually made it pretty easy because in those years, there is one author who has blown me away more consecutive times than any other. The book I chose is The Wolf Wants In by Laura McHugh. I love all of Laura's work. And I felt that way before I ever met her. I totally fangirled all over her about Chicago and Tampa after I bugged my friend Jill into introducing us. But of all of her books, this one is my favorite because the tapestry she weaves here is just so rich. There's murder, of course, but more than one, and the very creepiest kind. You add in class, family, drugs, secrets, gossip, suspicion, all set in a small town where everyone knows everyone's business, or at least thinks they do. And nobody seems entirely trustworthy. We see the story unfolds here in dual first-person narratives told by Sadie Keller and Henley Pettit, and I love both of those names. Each a young woman desperate to unravel the foundations of this little town in their own ways. The story not only jumps narrators, but timelines. And as John said earlier, nobody but a master of the genre can pull that off, but McHugh, she does it here with a very deft hand. Sadie is mourning her brother's recent unsolved death and on a relentless quest for answers because she believes there is more to how he died than anyone has bothered to find out, probably largely because the few officers they have in the local small town police department are completely consumed by the child's skull that was just discovered in the woods on the edge of town. As, maybe they should be. The other narrator, Henley, she comes from a family that the entire town has looked down on for generations. She's 18. She is desperate to get away from her recovering alcoholic mother and out of Blackwater and nurturing some secrets of her own. Anything more than that, and I think I might spoil a twist because there are a lot of them, but beyond the story and everything it contains, I always admire Laura's ability to not let a single word go to waste in her books. I'm going to read one sentence to give you an example of that because this particular sentence haunted me for weeks because I thought the writing was just so fabulous and the voice was really wonderful. And it's from a chapter that's told from Henley's point of view. She had wanted to leave for some time now, to take in the world beyond this stifling, landlocked place known for grain and Jesus and tornadoes, where everyone knew she was a Pettit and what that was supposed to mean. And in just one sentence, you get the whole town and what everybody thinks and how this girl feels about her family and the way she grew up. The writing throughout the whole book is vivid and tight. The plot is twisty and propulsive and everything happens for a reason, but darned if I could figure out what it was until Laura wanted me to know. I love books that make me care about the characters. And even when I didn't agree with these young women, I identified with them on some level. I admired their guts. I cheered them on. And if all of that is not enough to make y'all click that buy now button, I love fiction that can entertain me while it teaches me something. And The Wolf Watson taught me a lot about the human side of the opioid crisis. If you watched Dopesick and found yourself engaged with the characters and their struggles, or you love a great mystery chock full of characters so real you want to either punch them in the throat or have a drink with them, then you should definitely read this book.
Thanks so much, LynDee.
This one.
I also am a huge fan of Laura McHugh. I think she's vastly undercelebrated, so I'm glad that you're bringing her to our audience, and I hope people will go out and check out her book. And with that, you can see that not only are the We Are What We Read guests diverse, but they themselves are committed to celebrating the vast array our genre has to offer. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will check out the bookstore, BOLO Books, We Are What We Read, bookshop.org store we have set up to make it easy for you to purchase these books and find them. And I hope that you will join us again next month for another episode of We Are What We Read. Until then, read often, read widely. Thank you, folks.